months ago, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, set the tone with a historic visit to Israel. Many called that his boldest foreign policy move. Today, that friendship went a step further. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reciprocated. He landed in New Delhi on a 6-day visit on the invitation of the Indian Prime Minister. The importance that India attaches to this visit was evident from the fact that Prime Minister Modi broke protocol to receive Prime Minister Netanyahu at the airport. Beyond the symbolism, though, there's much more on the agenda: defense, water, innovation, and yes, Bollywood too.
It was a special welcome for a special visit. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu landed in Delhi on a pleasant Sunday afternoon. It's only the second visit by an Israeli premier ever. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi broke protocol and drove down to the Delhi airport to personally receive the Israeli PM, just as Netanyahu had when Prime Minister Modi visited Israel 6 months ago. It was clear from their hugs and handshakes that their friendship and personal chemistry was as strong as ever. And in their tweets, both the leaders referred repeatedly to each other as friends. India formally sealed the friendship by renaming the Teen Murti Square in the heart of the national capital, Delhi, as Teen Murti Haifa Chowk. Haifa marks the enduring bond between India and Israel. Exactly 100 years ago, Indian forces liberated the city of Haifa during the First World War. Prime Minister Modi, in fact, visited Haifa during his Israel trip and paid homage to the Indian soldiers whose sacrifice helped protect Haifa. The Prime Ministers paid homage to the fallen soldiers, and Prime Minister Modi wrote in the visitor's book, "It is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Many golden pages of the sacrifices of Indian braves are written in the history of both world wars. One of these pages was written 100 years ago in the sacrifice of Indian soldiers at Haifa. The sacrifice commemorated at Teen Murti observes its centenary. Naming the spot as Teen Murti Haifa Chowk marks this historic occasion. In the presence of the Prime Minister of Israel, we pay homage to the brave soldiers. Salute to the great Indian traditions of selfless sacrifice and penance." Now, 100 years later, India and Israel will seek to set their bilateral ties on a higher trajectory during Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to India. On this 6-day trip, the Israeli PM brings with him a 130-member delegation aiming to strengthen trade and defense relations. Israel needs large markets for its export-driven economy and has been working towards deepening ties with India. The two leaders will hold comprehensive talks in Delhi, and Prime Minister Modi will take his Israeli friend on a visit to his home state of Gujarat, looking to rekindle their bromance over the next few days as their two nations seize the opportunity of a rapidly changing world order. Bureau Report, WION.
So as India and Israel look back at 25 years of bilateral ties and look ahead to open new vistas, the question everyone is asking is, what's the next big thing in India-Israel ties? And no, it's not defense, it's innovation. If you're surprised, don't be. Listen in to the Israeli ambassador to India.
I would say that the headline or the most important element of what we want to put together on the joint table is innovation as a cross-cutting issue. Innovation that could touch any of the areas in which we cooperate. Innovation could be in the field of defense, and innovation could be in the field of agriculture. Innovation could be in the field of IT, of R&D. But we see it as a cross-cutting issue, and this will dominate, I would say, the agenda.
Now, it flows from what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Israel in July last year, the first ever by an Indian premier. Netanyahu had said, and I'm quoting, "We are setting up a $40 million innovation fund as the seed for greater cooperation and technology between us. I believe the formula for success is I2T2, that equals Indian talent times Israeli technology equals India-Israel ties for tomorrow." India and Israel have agreed to use this $40 million innovation fund to do a lot of things, increase economic cooperation to start with, boost research and development. Each country will allocate $4 million every year over a period of 5 years. It will be run by Israel Innovation Authority in collaboration with India's Ministry of Science and Technology.
I think it would be technology for solving the problems of society. And across the board, whether you're talking about agriculture, medicine, education, homeland security or defense, and the ability of young people to develop these technologies relevant to the society in which they live, and having venture capital to support startups which will use this technology. I think this is something in which India can learn a lot from Israel. We can collaborate with them. There are areas in which we can contribute to a very substantial, mutually beneficial cooperation.
The other big ideas are in the fields of agriculture, water, free trade agreement and defense, of course.
Spike project is an example of Israel engaging in Make in India, because the Spike project can be implemented through a partnership between an Israeli company, an Indian company.
Prime Minister Modi wants India to approach agriculture and water from a strategic perspective. And this is where all of this is coming from. Joining us this evening to discuss this further is Arsen Ostrovsky, international human rights lawyer and political analyst with us from Tel Aviv. Harshvi Pant, Distinguished Fellow and Head of ORF's Strategic Studies Program with us from New Delhi. Ambassador Arun Singh, former Indian Ambassador to Israel, with me in the studio. And Harinder Mishra, PTI's correspondent in Jerusalem. Good evening to all of you. Ambassador Singh, let me begin with you. Are any big bang announcements expected?
So I think from the announcements that have been made so far, they've indicated that there would be agreements, cooperation in different areas, agriculture, cybersecurity and others. So far, there is, of course, not been any indication of a major, what you describe as a big bang announcement. But I think the visit of the Israeli Prime Minister is a big bang event in itself, because it shows that the optics and politics of the India-Israel relationship has changed. For a long time, there was a reticence, especially on our side, to engage Israel very proactively politically. But the Indian president made a first ever visit to Israel in 2015. Within a year, the Israeli president did a return visit. Our prime minister made a first ever visit to Israel in the middle of last year. And within 6 months, the Israeli prime minister makes a return visit. So I think this exchange of visits at that level are what I would say big bang developments in themselves, showing that the optics and the politics of the relationship has changed, building on the substantive cooperation that has been happening in different areas, technology, defense. You referred to innovation. And as you know, US has the largest number of startups in the world. The second largest number of startups in the world are in Israel. And I remember when I was serving as ambassador to Israel, once I was shocked to read a newspaper headline saying Israel under threat from India. And I said, what is this about? And I read that carefully, and it says that India is catching up with Israel in the number of startups. So given that, I think, and with the new emphasis in India on innovation and startups, innovation, technology are going to be the key drivers of the relationship going forward. Because also if you look at our trade relationship, today it's about $5 billion. 10 years ago when I was serving in Israel, it was $5 billion. So it has stagnated. So to expand the trade and economic relationship, we have to create new opportunity. And for that, the innovation partnership would be critical. So
right, and defense is something, Harinder, that both sides do not like to talk about, but that is the bedrock of the relationship, according to people who've observed this relationship closely over the years. And it seems that the work that gets done gets drowned in the optics, the symbolism, the hugs and the headlines that come out. What are your sources in Jerusalem telling you about what the expectation from the Israeli side is from this visit?
All the Spike deal that India cancelled has been in news and has been widely talked about here in Israel. And on Wednesday, while the preparations were on for the India visit, I had a chance to ask Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself a question related to that. And he tried to kind of avoid that. And he said, regardless of a deal here or there happening or not happening, the relationship has definitely deepened, and both the sides are willing to cooperate. And even in the field of defense, he thinks that there's a lot of potential, and the two countries can join hands together and can make the Make in India program a success.
Harsh, how do you see this? They called it a marriage made in heaven the last time the two leaders met, and like every good marriage, I think they're approaching it in a very pragmatic manner. There will be differences, but the basics remain solid. Is that how you would describe it?
The question that I asked him regarding India's vote at the UN General Assembly, his response was that while he could have expected a different vote from India, but at the same time, he thinks that, these things he said that the international forums, if I can quote what exactly he said that at international forums, such things take a while, and India for its own reasons has been traditionally voting the way it has voted, and the pattern still continues. But he expressed hopes that that can also change over a period of time. Definitely the relations have deepened, and as Ambassador Singh just pointed out, there has also been a lot of diversification. But one important point that he mentioned just now is that the bilateral figures have stagnated during the last 10 years. Actually, when he was here, the figures were about $5 billion. The bilateral trade figures that have been quoted this year, it is around $4.2 billion. It's actually a marginal decrease rather than increase. So the two leaders, while they're talking about deepening ties and they're talking more about innovation and and also including other areas to enhance bilateral trade, the bilateral trade has actually taken a hit, and it has decreased during the last 4 or 5 years.
Harsh V. Pant, the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Tel Aviv last year was called one of his boldest foreign policy moves. What does Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Delhi mean for Narendra Modi?
I think it means that a certain normalization of this relationship has taken place over the last few years. And I think that is very important in any relationship because as the ambassador was pointing out earlier, that we had tended to be reticent in the past about our relationship with Israel. And I think now that Mr. Netanyahu is reciprocating Mr. Modi's visit, it's a symbol that I think both sides understand each other better, despite the problems. I think the problems that have been identified earlier, whether it was India's vote at the UN, at the General Assembly, or the issue of defense deal being cancelled. I think if you can move beyond this, if you can articulate a position that despite these differences, the relationship is doing great, I think it's a sign of a very mature relationship. And the fact that the two countries recognize or view the world through relatively similar prisms, despite the fact that there are differences in their opinion as to what their foreign policy interests may take them in different directions. So by and large, what we are witnessing is a maturing of a relationship that used to be out of the public purview.
Arsen, 6 months back, someone from Israel described the Indian Prime Minister's visit to that country as a national event. And I can see from your tweets how excited you are. But does the average Israeli share your enthusiasm where their Prime Minister visits New Delhi, the first in 15 years to do so?
Look, I think Israelis, not just at the top government echelon level, but on the street, are very excited by this relationship. It is certainly very much over the news of the press here. In Israel, you're seeing, people describing it as a bromance. In India, we're seeing it described as hug diplomacy. That might sound jovial, but I think it really does also go to show that there's an incredible warmth and closeness, not just between the two leaders, but increasingly and growingly between the two nations as well. Netanyahu, before he left for the historic trip, called India, a relationship with India, as a blessing for the state of Israel. And today in the meeting with Minister Swaraj, he again reiterated that it's a match made in heaven. And you saw Prime Minister Modi's warm embrace of him, very much against protocol, to greet a foreign dignitary, saying, "Welcome to Israel, my friend," and talking about further cementing this relationship. But I think another very important point has been stressed by a few of the other speakers before me is, noting that Prime Minister Netanyahu has taken with him a delegation of over 100 people. It's one of the largest delegations, including, I think, over 100 CEOs and leaders of businesses. So I think that it will not be just about the optics and the symbolism, which in itself is incredibly important in the context of foreign policy and relationships within the international arena. But you are going to see, I think, a number of bilateral agreements. I think they're expecting at least 10 signed, not only in defense, where Israel is already the top supplier of arms to India, but you'll see it in cybersecurity, in water, agriculture, innovation, even culture and Bollywood. So really there's nothing that's off the table. And although the trade has stagnated over the last number of years, it is a long-term process, and I think you're going to see this relationship go from strength to strength.
Ambassador Singh, there were some sticking points, including, say, tech transfer when Israeli companies do business here in India. How much progress have we made since the Indian Prime Minister's visit, and how much more is expected in the next 5 days?
So, 6 months is too short a period to look at how tech transfers flow, because the two visits, what they've done is working on changing further the atmosphere of the relationship. Because substantive cooperation was certainly happening, but with this level of political exchanges, people in Israel, leadership in Israel, corporate leaders in Israel will get even more confidence in the relationship. And I think they'd be willing to look more at working with India, investing in India, doing technology and other transfers to India. Because in all this, confidence is critical. And in India, there is an awareness that, for example, in the 1962, 65 and 71 conflicts that we had, supplies from Israel were helpful to India. During the Kargil conflict, supplies from Israel had been extremely helpful to India. So that gives people and leadership in India certain confidence in the Israel relationship. And they're prepared to work and do more with Israel, including in defense. Similarly, when Israeli corporate leaders, those in defense and other areas, start looking at the new atmosphere of the relationship, certainly more technology transfers and cooperation will happen. And I think the emphasis now on innovation and startups would also be an enabling feature of that. Some Indian companies, for example, have started partnering with Israeli universities to do innovation, to look at generating technology, look at commercializing technology, because Israeli universities have been very good at that. So all this will create new opportunity.
Wait and see. 5 more days to go, and this is an action-packed visit. I'm going to thank you all. Arsen, Harsh, Harinder and Ambassador Singh, thank you for joining us here on this discussion. And if optics is anything to go by, then the last few weeks have not been particularly a good backdrop for Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to India. The cancellation of the Spike anti-tank guided missile deal worth $500 million and India's vote in favor of a United Nations resolution critical of Israel have taken the shine off a visit that is high on symbolism, as we just discussed, and substance alike. WION's Ramesh Ramachandran with this report.
3 weeks ago, India voted against Israel in the United Nations General Assembly. The resolution condemned the United States' decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. If Israel felt disappointed, it is not showing it.
The relationship is an all-weather relationship. It is not influenced by anything external to this relationship.
Pressed further at a press conference in New Delhi on Friday, the Israeli envoy insisted that all is well in their relationship.
The question is, will it influence the relationship? I don't think it can influence the relationship.
But persistent questioning by reporters provoked a qualified response from the envoy.
I think that the relationship is much stronger than one vote at the UN here and there. This is not to say that votes at the UN are not important. They are important to India when it has to do with affairs that have to do with India, and they are important for Israel, and it will continue to be an issue for discussions between our countries in diplomatic channels.
As for India, it says its ties with Israel and Palestine are independent of each other.
Our relationship with Israel is a normal relationship like other countries have. And right from the beginning, when we set up diplomatic relations, it was understood, both in Israel and in India and in the Arab world, that India would continue to support the rights of the Palestinians to their own state, and that negotiation should be held between Israel and Palestine to that end. So I believe our relationship has always been somewhat dehyphenated.
However, some in India worry whether India's foreign policy is nimble or mature enough to manage contradictions in its engagements with Israel, Palestine, Iran and the Arab world. Ramesh Ramachandran, WION.
We keep using the word historic, and this visit most certainly is, in more ways than one in fact. Benjamin Netanyahu is only the fourth world leader for whom Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has broken protocol and personally received at the airport. He did it when then US President Barack Obama came to India in 2015, then last year when the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi came calling, and again when Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina visited India. This was in 2015. The pictures on the screen. Barack Obama invited by Prime Minister Modi to be the chief guest of the Republic Day parade on the 26th of January. When the then US President arrived in Delhi, Prime Minister Modi went to the airport personally to receive him and wife Michelle. And these pictures are from January last year. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, was invited to be the chief guest of the Republic Day parade. Once again, the Indian Prime Minister set aside protocol to welcome the Crown Prince at the airport. And on your screen now is Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She came to India in April last year. Her first visit after Prime Minister Modi took office. He again went to the airport to welcome her. And this happened today. Prime Minister Modi personally receiving Benjamin Netanyahu, just as the Israeli Prime Minister had done when Modi went to Tel Aviv 6 months ago. And for those who missed the action in New Delhi, do not worry. Twitter has you covered. An active social media presence has been one of the hallmarks of diplomatic engagements between India and Israel, and today was no different.
This is how the first day of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu looked like, in case you were following the day's events through your Twitter feed. Twitteratis saw it all. The warm hug between the two leaders, to some somber ceremony at Teen Murti Chowk, where the two leaders paid homage to Indian soldiers who fought to liberate Haifa. There was also an element of personal touch by both leaders to the Twitter diplomacy. And Prime Minister Netanyahu expressed his thanks for the warm welcome in Hindi. In the run-up to the visit, some citizens of Delhi took over the Israeli embassy's Twitter feed to welcome Prime Minister Netanyahu. Bureau Report, WION.
From a nuclear storm to one over bread. That's right, the French baguette is in the headlines. The country's bakers have started a campaign to get it registered as UNESCO heritage, and none other than Emmanuel Macron has thrown his presidential weight behind it.
It's on every French table. It's in every French kitchen. Few things are as quintessentially French as the baguette, a thick, long loaf that is quite literally the daily bread of the French. Now inspired by how Italy's Naples pizza was protected by the UN's cultural body, bakers in France are seeking World Heritage status for the traditional baguette, and throwing his weight behind them is none other than French President Emmanuel Macron. Calling it the envy of the world, Macron wants the baguette to be listed as a UNESCO cultural treasure. The baguette is envied in the whole world. We need to preserve its excellence and know-how. This is why it needs to be classified as heritage. The United Nations Cultural Organization has designated certain cultural foods or cuisines to its intangible cultural heritage list. The traditional Japanese cuisine, washoku, Belgian beer culture, and the Korean way of making kimchi are just a few of the many foods and practices on that list. In France, the baguette is sacred. There's a proper way to carry it and a right way to eat it. You can't walk down a street in France without spotting a boulangerie and at least one French person with a fresh baguette stuck under his arm. The baguette is so important to the French way of life that there are competitions dedicated to finding the perfect one. Baguettes are even protected by law. The Bread Decree of 1993 mandates that they must be made on the same premises where they're sold, may never be frozen, and must contain only flour, water, yeast and salt. No doubt the French take this humble piece of bread very, very seriously. Bureau Report, WION.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has flown in a special gift from Israel for his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi. What is this gift and why was it chosen? Also, what's the return gift that he's getting? Find out in this next report.
Last year, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi presented Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with replicas of 2 sets of copper plates which were believed to be inscribed between the 9th and 10th century. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister has a rather more modern gift from the 21st century for Modi, and it is this Jeep. But this is no ordinary Jeep. It's a water desalination and purification vehicle called Galmobile, which cleans dirty or salty water for human consumption anywhere, anytime.
Experimenting the Galmobile desalinating and water purifying vehicle. Minutes later, I said goodbye to the vehicle because we have a vehicle that came here a couple of days ago, and it will be it will be gifted to Prime Minister Modi. We just took it out of the customs yesterday. We are sending it to Gujarat, and I think this will be a wonderful continuity of what started on the beach near Tel Aviv.
This vehicle is not unfamiliar to Modi. This was the very same vehicle that Modi and Netanyahu had taken a ride in together on Olga Beach near Tel Aviv last year in June. Modi and Netanyahu had witnessed a demonstration of the seawater purification technology pioneered by Israel at a water desalination unit while on a stroll. Both the prime ministers were seen sipping samples of water from wine glasses and even raising a toast while strolling on the beach. So, what is so special about this Jeep that the Israeli Prime Minister will be gifting it to his counterpart? Last year, after riding on the Galmobile, Modi seemed very impressed with the technology. He reacted by saying, "I am thankful to Bibi because the vehicle which I saw today, particularly during a natural calamity when people are suffering from shortage of drinking water, can provide drinking water." The Galmobile is an all-in-one system that can source, treat, store and distribute water. It can connect to any possible source, whether rivers, brackish water or wells. This technology produces drinking water in compliance with the World Health Organization standards. It is resistant to all weather conditions and has an advanced control system, which means anyone can operate it. The Galmobile seems to be a rather wise choice for a gift for Narendra Modi. A large part of the Indian population does not have access to proper drinking water, and with a steadily increasing population that will reach an estimated 1.7 billion by 2050, there is a dire need to find ways to provide clean drinking water for everyone. And Galmobile-like technology can be a huge help to India, especially since the country has a large part of its borders linked to seas and oceans. Shivangi Shukla for WION.